There's something haunting about arriving late to your own destiny. Most singers chase stardom in their 20s, hungry and reckless, burning bright before the world forgets their names. But Melvin Edmonds was 40 years old when the spotlight finally found him. 40 years of factory floors and weekend gigs. 40 years of believing in a voice the world hadn't yet heard. And when success came, it didn't arrive with the fire of youth, it came with the weight of experience, with hands that had tightened bolts at Chrysler and a tone seasoned by patience. This is the story of After 7, an R&B group born from brotherhood and blessed by Babyface, and of Melvin Edmonds, the man whose voice made grown folks remember what real soul sounded like. If stories like these move you, legends who waited, who persevered, who sang truth when the world stopped listening, then you're going to love this channel. Hit that subscribe button for Legends Underrated, because we're just getting started. Long before Virgin Records or platinum plaques, there was a modest house on the east side of Indianapolis where music lived in every corner. Melvin Edmonds Sr. loved Nat King Cole, playing his records on Sunday mornings, while Barbara, his wife, kept faith and order among their 6 sons. Marvin Jr., Melvin, Michael, Kevon, Kenneth, and Derek, they all sang, but it was Melvin and Kevon who carried something special. Melvin, the second oldest, wasn't loud by nature. He was steady, observant, the kind of man who spoke little but made every word count. His voice, though, told a different story. It carried the texture of old church hymns mixed with the grit of street corner soul. When he sang Sam Cooke or The Temptations in that living room, even his brothers would stop and listen. There was a richness there, a weight that felt lived in. By 15, Melvin was leading a neighborhood band called Soul Innovations, performing at local events around Indianapolis. People noticed the voice, always the voice. But dreams don't pay rent, and Marvin Sr. had made that clear before he passed in 1972. So Melvin did what men did. He got married, had children, and went to work at the Chrysler plant, tightening bolts and humming melodies under the hum of machinery. Meanwhile, his youngest brother Kenneth, who everyone called Babyface, was chasing music full time. By the mid-'80s, Babyface and his partner L.A. Reid were becoming 2 of the most powerful producers in R&B, crafting hits for Bobby Brown, Pebbles, and the Whispers. Every so often, Babyface would call home. "Keep singing," he'd say. "Your time will come." Melvin believed him. He had to, because belief was all he had left. Kevon Edmonds met Keith Mitchell at Indiana University, Bloomington in the late 70s. They were part of a class called the Indiana University Soul Review, learning the business and craft of rhythm and blues performance. During summer breaks, Kevon and Keith would return to Indianapolis and link up with Melvin. The 3 of them started performing at local clubs, doing covers of the Whispers, Shalimar, Earth, Wind, and Fire, any group with harmony and heart. They weren't polished. They didn't have a manager or a deal, but they had chemistry, and they had Melvin's voice anchoring every note. For years, this was their routine. Kevon worked at Eli Lilly and Company, Keith worked at John Hancock in Chicago, and Melvin stayed at Chrysler. Music was the thing they did after work, after responsibilities, after the world had taken its share. They rehearsed in basements, recorded demos on cheap equipment, and played anywhere someone would listen. No one was calling, no one was watching, but they kept showing up. By the late 80s, Babyface had reached a level of success most producers only dream of. He and L.A. Reed had just signed a lucrative production deal with Virgin Records, and the label wanted them to develop new acts. Babyface didn't hesitate. He called Indianapolis. Melvin, Kevon, it's time. I got you a record deal. That phone call changed everything. Virgin Records signed them without ever seeing a photo, without a showcase, without an audition. They trusted Babyface, and Babyface trusted his brothers. The name came from Babyface's answering machine. After 7, please leave a message. It sounded smooth, mysterious, a little romantic. For the brothers, it meant something deeper. After 7 was when the real music happened. After the day ended, after work, after all the noise faded away, it was when honesty took over. When Virgin signed them in 1988, Melvin was already well into his 30s. Kevin and Keith were younger, but none of them fit the mold of the typical new artist. They weren't trying to be the next New Edition or Bobby Brown. They were grown men with grown voices, singing about grown love. The debut album, simply titled After 7, was released in August of 1989. Babyface in L.A. Reed produced most of the tracks, crafting a sound that blended New Jack Swing with classic soul. The first single, Heat of the Moment, climbed to number 5 on the R&B charts. Radio loved it, listeners loved it, but it was the second single that made the world stop. Ready or Not opened with a promise. I'll give you the sun, the rain, the moon, the stars, and the mountains. Melvin sang it like a man who meant every word. The song shot to number 1 on the R&B charts and reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. It wasn't just a hit, it was a moment. People heard something they'd been missing: sincerity. The third single, Can't Stop, did even better, reaching number 1 on R&B and number 6 on the Hot 100. It earned them a Grammy nomination for Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group at the 33rd Annual Grammy Awards in 1991. The album went platinum. After years of waiting, Melvin Edmonds was finally standing where he belonged. Success, though, comes with a price. By 1990, after 7 was everywhere, they toured with MC Hammer, opened for Whitney Houston on her I'm Your Baby Tonight World Tour, and won an NAACP Image Award for Best New Male Artist or Group. The schedule was relentless: early flights, late shows, interviews, photo shoots. For Melvin, who had spent decades living a quiet life, the sudden rush of fame felt overwhelming. He loved performing, but everything else, the cameras, the business meetings, the constant motion drained him. Then came the moment that would haunt him. Babyface had written a song called My, a seductive ballad meant for After 7. It was exactly the kind of track Melvin could have owned. But when the recording session came, Melvin didn't show up. He was struggling quietly with personal issues, exhaustion, and the creeping weight of addiction. Hours passed. Calls went unanswered. The producers couldn't wait. Johnny Gill, who was recording nearby, stepped in and sang it. Babyface brought in Kenny G for the saxophone solo, and together they turned My into one of the biggest R&B hits of 1990. After 7 still sang background vocals, but everyone knew what that song could have been. Kevon later said in interviews that Melvin had always carried an addictive personality, something he used to manage the pressure he felt inside. There was no judgment in his words, only love and sadness. Despite the struggles, After 7 continued to rise. In 1991, they recorded Nights Like This. for the Five Heartbeats soundtrack. The song reached the top 10 on the R&B charts and became an instant classic, showcasing the group's ability to honor Motown while staying modern. Their second album, Taking My Time, was released in August of 1992. Surprisingly, Babyface and L.A. Reid stepped back from production, focusing on other artists. Instead, the album was crafted by Daryl Simmons, Kyo, Dallas Austin, and Randy Rand, giving it a distinct new jack swing flavor. The lead single, a medley of Baby I'm For Real and Natural High, reached number 2 on the R&B charts. The album went platinum, proving that After 7 could thrive even without their famous brother behind every track. Songs like Kickin' It and Can He Love You Like This kept them relevant in an increasingly competitive landscape. By 1995, the group released Reflections, their third studio album. For the first time, Melvin and Kevon were credited as executive producers, taking more creative control. The single Till You Do Me Right climbed to number 4 on the R&B charts. Critics praised the album's maturity and vocal depth, but the industry was changing. Hip-hop was dominating radio. Labels were chasing youth and tempo over harmony and heart. Virgin Records, once so confident in After 7, began pulling back. Budgets shrank. Promotion slowed. The calls came less often. When Virgin finally released After 7 from their contract, clearing their debts and wishing them well, it felt less like freedom and more like goodbye. No other label came calling. The group disbanded in 1997. Melvin, the soul of the trio, walked away without fanfare. He returned to the life he knew before fame, working as a truck driver, raising his family, staying out of sight. People whispered that he'd left because of drugs. Others said he couldn't handle the business. The truth was simpler and sadder. Melvin never stopped loving music. He just stopped loving what fame did to it. The late 90s and early 2000s were quiet years for Melvin Edmonds. He found peace in ordinary work, logging long miles across the Midwest, listening to old records, living without cameras or expectations. Every so often, Babyface would call, asking him to sing background vocals or record a demo. And when Melvin showed up, the magic returned. That tone, smoky, sincere, unpolished, was still there, unchanged by time or struggle. In 1996, his voice appeared on Johnny Gill's Let's Get the Mood Right. The following year, he joined Babyface, Kevon, and members of Jodeci under the name Milestone for the Soul Food soundtrack. Their song, I Care About You, became an instant classic, a reminder of what real R&B sounded like. But after each session, Melvin would return to his quiet life, letting fame drift where it would. Then, in 2011, life forced him to pause. Melvin suffered a stroke that left one side of his body partially paralyzed. For many, that would have been the end, but not for Melvin. His son Jason stepped forward, joining After 7 Inches his father's place. Watching his son sing those same songs on stage was bittersweet, time looping back on itself, the legacy continuing even as the body that built it began to fade. Melvin never made a scene about his condition. He focused on getting better, slowly rebuilding his strength. Music still lived in his home, in his conversations, in the quiet nods he gave when a familiar tune came on the radio. Years later, when Babyface reached out again with new songs, asking if After 7 was ready to reunite, Kevon and Keith agreed, but only if Melvin wanted to be part of it. His health was fragile, his voice softer than before, but his answer was simple. Let's do it. In 2016, after 7 released Timeless, their first studio album in over 20 years, the album title couldn't have been more fitting. The first single, I Want You, climbed into the top 10 on Billboard's adult R&B chart. Songs like Runnin' Out and Let Me Know carried the same spirit as their early hits, smooth, soulful, and full of heart. For fans, it was a miracle. For Melvin, it was closure. The long road, the waiting, the pain, it all found peace in that record. He performed a few shows with the group, smiling more now than ever before. The stage no longer felt like a burden. It felt like home again. But behind that quiet triumph, time was running short. On May 18th, 2019, the music stopped. Melvin Edmonds passed away after a brief illness. He was 65 years old. The cause was never publicly revealed, and perhaps it didn't need to be. Those who loved his voice understood that some stories don't end with answers, they end with echoes. Across America, tributes began to surface. Radio hosts paused between songs, their voices softening as they remembered the man who once made R&B feel like home. Fans left messages under old videos. Thank you, Melvin. If you're moved by stories of artists who gave everything for their craft, who waited decades for their moment, make sure you're subscribed to Legends Underrated. We uncover the voices history almost forgot. In August of 2021, after 7 released Unfinished Business, their 5th studio album, and a tribute to the brother they lost. The record featured Melvin's voice in interlude short moments where he spoke or sang, preserved like memories trapped in time. His presence guided the album, reminding listeners that even absence can sound beautiful. Kevon and Keith, joined by new member Danny McClain, carried the emotional weight, singing not just for themselves but for the brother who could no longer stand beside them. Songs like Tomorrow Can't Wait held a quiet power, echoes of grief mixed with gratitude. Critics called the album a masterclass in dignity, a phrase that could just as easily describe Melvin himself. Beyond the music, his story became a point of reflection for a generation of artists and listeners who grew up in the golden age of R&B. In an era obsessed with fame, Melvin represented something rare: humility. He proved that greatness doesn't always demand attention. Sometimes it just requires truth. Around the world, from the UK to Brazil to Japan, places where 90s R&B still plays in nightclubs and cafes, fans rediscovered. After 7, vinyl collectors hunted for their old records. Younger musicians cited Melvin's tone as a blueprint for emotional singing. His influence, once quiet, had begun to ripple outward. To this day, Ready or Not still drifts through late-night radio playlists. That opening line, I'll give you the sun, the rain, the moon, the stars, and the mountains, carrying the warmth of a voice that once turned simplicity into poetry. The stage lights fade once more, and somewhere in the distance, a familiar harmony lingers, gentle, unhurried, eternal. It's the sound of Melvin Edmonds, the man whose voice could turn an ordinary lyric into something sacred. For nearly 4 decades, he carried a truth that few artists ever master. Fame is temporary, but soul is forever. He didn't sing for spotlights or praise. He sang because music was the one language that never betrayed him. When we listen to Ready or Not or Can't Stop today, we're not just hearing songs, we're hearing time itself. We hear the late nights in the studio with his brothers, the endless tours, the laughter backstage, the heartbreak of missed chances, and the quiet redemption that came when he found his way back to music. Melvin Edmonds was part of something bigger than a group. He was part of a lineage, a tradition of American soul built on truth, vulnerability, and faith. From Sam Cooke to Donny Hathaway to Marvin Gaye, his name now stands quietly among them, another voice that refused to fade. And while the world often celebrated his brother Babyface for writing the songs that defined an era, those who truly listened knew it was Melvin's tone, his phrasing, his honesty that gave those songs their heart. After 7 continues today, carrying his memory in every chord. Their 2021 album, Unfinished Business, felt less like a comeback and more like a continuation, a reminder that some voices never truly leave. They simply change form, echoing through those they've touched. In the broader story of American music, Melvin Edmonds represents something rare. The unspoken heroes who hold the harmony together while others take the lead. His story isn't about fame, it's about endurance, about showing up even when the world stops listening. And maybe that's why his legacy still matters. Because for every singer who ever doubted themselves, for every artist who walked away because the world didn't understand, Melvin's journey whispers, "You were enough all along." He proved that even when a voice falls silent, the song goes on, carried by those who remember. So tonight, wherever you are, if one of his songs comes on the radio, don't skip it, let it play. Let that sound rich, soulful, and beautifully imperfect remind you of a time when music felt like truth. And if this story moved you, if you believe in honoring the legends who never got their full due, then subscribe to Legends Underrated, because some stars never fade, they just wait for us to remember.